And hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show.
The
And,
only one ever. Oh, sorry.
yeah, basically. And, yeah, I'm the first of, what is hopefully at least more than one uh, character analysis video, bit of a first for here. I'm joined by my co-pilot of the day, redbloodcherrie.
Yeah. Hello. You can probably find me on YouTube and Twitch under one of those. If it's not Red Blood Cherry, like Blood Cherries. We're a system who does game things. You'll find us.
And yeah, and this is probably one of the best times to talk about this particular character in this particular Ace Attorney game, because for those not in the know, Capcom recently, announced that they're re-releasing what is, I guess now coined the Apollo Justice trilogy of the Ace Attorney games, with Apollo Justice, Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, and Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice. And yeah, that is the one we're going to be talking about today.
That it is.
Yeah.
I told you before, I should give a couple disclaimers that first, I'm not a medical professional in any way. I don't know psychology. I took like one class once years ago. I wouldn't even count that as anything. And I'm also not medically diagnosed. This is a suspected DID or OSDD diagnosis, so just keep that in mind. Also, I'm not as familiar with this game as I am the earlier games because I'm a big fan of like the first original trilogy.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess just laying down the groundwork for those watching not in the know. The Phoenix Wright, or more accurately, the Ace Attorney series of games is a combination of visual novel and point and click 'em up adventure type style gameplay, in which at first you played solely as Phoenix Wright, the Ace Attorney, and help him investigate crime scenes and prove his client's innocence. But as the series has evolved, they've added more characters to his main and supporting cast. After him, we were introduced to Apollo Justice, and in Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, we were introduced to Athena Sykes, the his third or his second or third, depending on how you look at it, employee. Which, if you're familiar with Phoenix Wright as a character, the idea that he is a boss with people who work for him now is just, it's very shocking, because we love Phoenix, but he's a bit of a disaster with very spiky hair. And yeah, and we're going to be talking about a particular character in one particular case. And well, Phoenix and Apollo were in another country that was currently in the throes of a cultural revolution, and breaking off the shackles of a military dictatorship. But that's not important right now. I mean, you think it would be, but it isn't. Athena, the youngest and most recent employee, is holding down the fort at home, still taking on, like mo- conventional cases that only have to deal with the fate of one person as opposed to, a country. But again, story for another day. And yeah, she's because, Athena and her coworkers and boss just have the worst luck. She finds herself in court about to defend a person and given literally no information other than, the person's name. Because if if you're familiar with the Ace Attorney games, they can none of the lawyers you play as can just like catch a break. And she is called to defend Bucky Wet, the fourth generation owner of a soba noodle stand. And, if you can get that pun, then you're hilarious. Because Phoenix Wright does love its characters with punny names. And yeah, spoilers for the fourth case in Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice, just a heads up. But yeah, as when Athena gets the lowdown of what the crime scene was like and the victim, I'm probably going to pronounce some of these names wrong, but the murder of one Uendo Toneido.
No, that's right.
Yeah, who is the owner of a Rakugo Theater, which is a really, really unique and awesome sort of storytelling style in which a person sits on their knees in the middle of a stage, and props are minimal, and it's basically using tone of voice and body language for what I understand to be pretty funny, various hilarious stories. And when Athena starts to get into the meat potatoes of the case and actually bring a witness on, we have two main witnesses. One of them is the character we're talking about today. The other is a clown lady. But she
Wouldn't be Ace Attorney without her.
it really, really wouldn't. And we're introduced to Uendo Toneido, which might not actually be his name, because within this Rakugo theater, the late founder of the theater gave his employees names as job titles. The titular character was given Uendo Toneido because he inherited the name from the person who had that name the last time. So, is it his real name? Who knows? There's a guy who owns a noodle stand in Ace Attorney whose name is Eldoon. So, you can never tell with names in this show, in these game series. And yeah. And when Uendo takes the stage, Athena, who has who is able to, when listens to his testimony, he's able to figure out that Uendo is having three very distinct, very different emotional reactions to discovering the scene of the crime. And because much like in the Pokemon anime, having psychic powers is just a thing that apparently can be as common as eye color. But anyway, she hears that too much emotion for just one person, and then she's eventually able to figure out that Uendo, just switching from serious to the laughing man to the slightly sterner figure is not just just Uendo showing off the tricks of the trade that I would assume you pick up when you're when you're a storyteller on a Rakugo stage. I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but yeah, she just is able. Also, I just want to point out that she's also 18, so she's able to make with the caveat that this is not 100% accurate to real life, because no fiction is. Just the fact that she's able to make what I assume is a diagnosis that would take a professional a fair amount of time to get it right. She's just able to figure it out right away, because again, it's Phoenix Wright. You can, get your dream job and become like an expert at it in a very short amount of time. And, I wish I had that talent. I wish I had that sort of talent in real life. But anyway, she eventually figures out that, yeah, Uendo does have, again, just, as Blood Red Cherry, stated, I guess I should just reiterate, just to be sure, like I'm also not a professional in this particular field, so for all I know, a lot of this stuff is like either off or way off, but just go along with this if you will. She figures out that Uendo Toneido has dissociative identity disorder, or DID, or DID, I guess. And the character, like Uendo and the two other, now is it alters? Is that the
Yeah.
term?
Yes, that's the correct term.
Okay, good. I got at least that right. We met, the Uendo and two other alters. There's Uendo, the one we see at the beginning before, the jig is up, who is, like the serious person, the sort of person that makes the sort of puns you'd expect in Rakugo storytelling, but without, like, breaking facial expression. There's Patches, the clown, like a self-admitted jester, and Kisegawa, courtesan, and I actually had to look this up because I have a very limited vocabulary. So, and just so you can say that that a video game actually taught you something. Courtesan is like a term used mainly in, like, I guess, old-timey times. It just meant like a prostitute that, caters to, the well-off or the very well-off.
Actually, yeah. I just learned something. I like kind of knew what it meant, but only like with context. So I didn't realize it was like specifically like prostitution. I was just like, oh.
Yeah, so, yeah, video games do teach you things. So, literally, right now. And, yeah. And the three of them give, like, their own accounts. Um, Cherry, you said you recorded that, obviously it's, a video game, and video games are only just starting to, like, tackle, like, any sort of sensitive subject with any amount of grace, and also it's Phoenix Wright. But, what was, when you first saw this while you were looking up this particular case in the game, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I told you. Well, I was like, I told you it seems very silly,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously that's not much of a surprise. Phoenix Wright is known for being like a comedic game, and that's part of the reasons I like it. Is there's like humor involved. It's fun, it's goofy, and I think if you look at it through the lens of this is Ace Attorney, I think that's like. I think I can give that a pass. Like in any other media, if this was the only unserious character, I might be a little more critical. But I mean, everyone's names are puns. I can't I can't really say much. It's really goofy.
Yeah.
There's some things that I think are a little inaccurate and things that are more accurate. Just to my experiences with others. I guess our experiences, but
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just this is just my point of view, and, like, I know it's, I mean, like, it's silly because Ace Attorney is silly, but when I played through it the first time, and, as someone who does not have DID and is, like, not a professional who studies this type of subject matter, take this with a grain of salt, but, Like, even though it was silly because it is Ace Attorney, like, Ace Attorney without silliness is like, Ace Attorney without at least one lawyer like, without, the sort, like, gay subtext between, like, the lawyer character and, like, a friend of theirs. But
Yes.
I thought, like, I was, like, surprised, like, silliness aside, like, I thought it was, like, like, pretty respectable. Like, as soon as, like, in the Ace Attorney games, the judge is, like, kind of the biggest dingus, but as soon as Athena explains, what's going on, like, the judge is just, like, accepts it right away. Um, Athena addresses of each altar, like, by name. She refers to Kisagawa as Miss Kisagawa because, Kisagawa is a female altar,
Mm.
which, I just thought that was nice. And, like, the Ace Attorney games in general are just, like, really silly, but I found that they, like, handle, like, certain, like, I don't know, mental health stuff, or even just, like, serious topics with, like, surprising sensitivity. Like, I remember in the original trilogies when, we found out that Edgeworth has, because, like, every main Ace Attorney character, Edgeworth is just, like, so many traumas. Like, he has developed, like, a pretty debilitating phobia of earthquakes, and, like, I remember, I think it was in the third game, which took place, I think, like, 2 years after the first game, when, they're investigating the scene of a crime, trying to help Maya, and, like, an earthquake hits, and he just kind of collapses, and he has to be, like, given a moment, and, like, Phoenix goes over and talks to him about it and sees it all's right, and, Edgeworth says that, like, consciously, he shouldn't, he can, he knows why he developed this phobia in the first place, and, he, like, put that part of his life, put that, like, bad moment from his childhood behind him, but, like, just like that, just because it was a childhood trauma, it just, like, affects him even if he rationally knows it shouldn't. And I remember in uh Dual Destinies, when we learn a bit about Athena's backstory, is just that either due to her, like her emotion sensing abilities, or just, for other reasons, she had, like, I don't know, super duper sensitive hearing when she was a little kid, and, like, her mom had to make her, like, special noise canceling headphones because it would get to her that much. And, like, whenever like, a character in Phoenix Wright talks about, just, like, a dark chapter of their life, because, Ace Attorney is a very funny game, but that only serves to, like, highlight, the dark moments, of which there are many. Like, yeah, it's silly. It's not 100% accurate to real life, but I think they did a good job treating it as respectfully as they could without, just, like, derailing the sort of thing that the Ace Attorney games is all about.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
I think. Oh
oh,
no.
no, sorry, you go ahead.
I think you're right. You're definitely right about the part where it's like it's a funny little game, but it's also talking about and covering very serious topics. I mean, every single case, except for, I think, almost, if not every single case, almost every single case has been a murder. And yeah, like you said, they tackle like Edgeworth's kind of like fear or phobia, or just maybe it might even just be a trigger, like with concerning earthquakes, because they surround a traumatic event that he was in. So I would agree that for the majority of this is decent representation. I also want to add the bar is very low.
Yeah,
um
like,
uh if this is your first, like, if this is somebody's first experience seeing what DID is meant to be like, I think it's not terrible. It's actually pretty good, because there are so much other worse portrayals out there. And like you said, like, obviously, it's a little bit of fiction stretching to be like, Athena, who is only 18, can just totally diagnose this character on the spot. Obviously, that doesn't happen. Nobody really gets diagnosed on the spot. That doesn't really happen with, like, I would hope any mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
except, like, maybe, like, ones that the professional is very familiar with. Like, usually that takes, like, an hour or 2, and I don't know. I guess we don't have a big concept of time in Ace Attorney, but that's probably the main unrealistic part is you probably wouldn't just figure that out as fast as she did.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, diagnosing somebody in the middle of a courtroom just seems like a breach of a lot of, like, different laws and ethics, but that's a whole nother cup of worms.
Yep. And later on, and I guess we can segue into the next part of just a little character analysis. Something that I remembered, and this actually, like, thinking back, it actually reminds me of some things I watched before. Like, one of my favorite YouTube channels is Cinema Therapy, in which, a man who's like an actual licensed therapist and a filmmaker, analyze, like they like take a character and analyze their like psychological issues. And, back to back they did, they looked at Split with James McAvoy from.
Oh god, don't get me started on that movie.
Oh no, like he was in, like, both of them were in full agreement, and like, it's a good movie. James McAvoy's a good actor, but this is like, in terms of just accurate, not even like
Just
inaccurate,
any representation.
just like not even in the realm of accuracy. Not just that it was slightly inaccurate, but and then they like flipped it around, and then they looked at like Marvel's Moon Knight, and how like, again, not 100% accurate, but very very much closer than Split was, because it actually got obvious some things wrong, some things as you said stretched a little, because it is a work of fiction, and it involves Oscar Isaac punching the crap out of monsters and dressing up like a mummy, kinda, but still. And yeah, so later on, like, as the case goes on, and um Athena like further questions Uendo, Patches, and Kisagawa, and they look more at they actually take everyone in court takes a more detailed look at the crime scene. Like, they notice these Karuta cards, and at first it spells wet number 4, which because Bucky wet, get it? Bucky wet, buck wet, buckwheat, from what I understand, a chief ingredient in soba noodles, of which he owns a restaurant of. Because it's Ace Attorney and puns. I remember once there was a character whose name the voice actor said with a straight face was Carmen Accidente.
Oh god.
Anyway. Yeah, and then later on, they figure out, due to some crime scene who's it's, they figure out, like, she posits that, I think I remember. It's been a while it's been at least a year since I played this, and the detail.
I'll be honest, I have like 3 wiki pages up right now.
Yep. And I think rearranges like the card, so instead of saying wet number 4, it actually says Owen 4th. And Athena hypothesizes that maybe Uendo is a 4th alter, that and then all 3 of them kind of just explicitly state that like no, wait, Patches, I remember Patches the most because he's such a silly boy. But he says, like, the three of them are always aware, and then they can switch out at will from, and, we actually see them switch from, like, A to B to C, and then back to C and B and A, which, from what I understand, is, like, a thing, kind of, but not to the extent that we see here.
Yeah, it's an uncommon, and it's taken to an extreme. Or I don't know, it might not be entirely an uncommon, but it is definitely taken to an extreme.
I mean, yeah.
I can go more into detail with that if you want.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. No, so switching, because this isn't something that's like has never been seen before. It doesn't happen. Like, it does happen. People do just go like boom, like A to B to C sometimes, and sometimes back. Something we experience. But yeah, just it's usually not that distinct.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually, especially outwardsly, if you know, like, if you're like, neurodivergence, ADHD, autism,
Mm-hmm.
like, the term masking, which is like kind of like hiding your mental illness, basically, for lack of a better way to explain it. And obviously the masking differs from person to person, so not every person masks the same, or masks at all, or only masks a little, whereas another might mask a lot. But like, personally, like, we mask like a lot. It's hard to even
Mm-hmm.
get out of the like single person pronouns mindset. Right now is very much just kind of like a act like one person, like, this is like a kind of a mask that's just like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like online persona kind of deal, which I would argue anyone kind of has, but that's a whole nother deal.
Yep.
So sometimes when this kind of like, it's called rapid switching, occurs, it does happen. What it doesn't, I don't usually see this in, like, outwardly in real life. I don't usually see it to such an extreme. Obviously, people don't like change hairstyles or something in like 2 seconds. That's obviously Ace Attorney fiction, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
just how fast, like, physically, like, the posture and the dialogue changes, it's likely possible. I don't want to say it's impossible, because I'm sure it is in some way, but it is, again, it's an extreme. It's unlikely. But it's not, in some ways it is kind of right though, because it gets the whole like, oh, sometimes different authors will change postures. Like, that's true. Like, I know some of us sit differently or prefer to sit differently than others. So that's not, I actually thought that was an interesting detail. I
Yep.
don't know.
And, like, I brought up, the therapist and filmmaker friend, and how they, like, talked about, Split and Moon Knight, because, a lot. This is automatically what I thought was going, just because.
Media tropes.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not an expert on, like, representation of any kind, but, I've, like, seen enough movies and shows that even if I'm not familiar with it, I know the bad version of it, the inaccurate version of it. And and some of the characters thought, or at least suspected, that, this fourth alter, Owen, might have been the killer, or just, knows more than the other three. And so, they take advantage of the fact that Uendo is a bit of a lightweight when it comes to booze, and it's like they figure out that Owen only comes out if the other three can't. And so they get them. So they bring in manju buns, because it's just, again, Ace Attorney wouldn't be Ace Attorney if they didn't just like eat random foods and things.
I didn't realize manju buns had any alcohol in them until this.
I think it's like is
it a special one?
Well, now
So
now I have to look this up.
It said they gave him a manju bun with like sake in it, and since he's such a lightweight, like, and this must be an incredible lightweight if you can get like tipsy off a manju bun.
And that's just funny right there.
Yeah, that's just funny. Like that's goofy. Like even people on antidepressants, SSRIs, like they're not that bad.
Yeah, we see and they pass out, and then again, like I had no idea. I was about to be taken to left field here, but they do the thing where they, like, there's dark, sinister music. Like
Oh god.
the person we assume is Owen just kind of just pulls themselves up in a way that you kind of expect they're gonna contort themselves like, I don't know, a demon from The Exorcist, or at least that's what I thought. And then we realize that Owen is like, oh my, like, I am a educator of the young people in my day-to-day job, so I've met many kids like Owen, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, he's adorable.
Aw.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, we find out that Owen is just literally just a little boy, and he says he's like 5 years old. And again, I think this is the only term I actually know. I think if an alter is younger than the others, that's referred to as a little.
It's specifically, I think, 7 and below, but some people, if it's like, I've seen some people do 10 and below, but usually it's 7 and below. I
Yep.
want to say.
And yep, and because they quickly find out that in contrast to some of the 5-year-olds I've had under my wing over the years, Owen is just the smallest crybaby, one of the smallest and crybabiest, and like I don't know, takes me back to my early days of teaching. But anyway, and yeah, they're able to, just because Owen is just a little guy, they quickly discount him as the killer, which I know what you said,
Okay.
yeah,
That context helps a little though.
yeah, and yeah, we learn a little bit about him, and then and this is the point where the clown lady becomes relevant, because you figure out that whenever Owen shows up, Typhoon Tornado, and oh gosh, I have to actually,
Is her name Garu? Is that it?
yeah, Geru
Yeah.
Tornado, which again is, as far as we know, just a job title, and not one she is particularly happy with, because she felt she got stiffed for a promotion. But anyway, we find out that whenever Owen shows up, Taifu and Giro just kind of keep him entertained like you would a real 5 years old. And then we realize that Owen actually didn't see the whole thing, but he did witness a key moment of the murder. And I'm looking at a screenshot on the Ace Attorney fandom wiki right now, and just, oh my, just look at this boy crying.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, and again, just again with the caveat that this is far from accurate, and I don't know, talk to a doctor who studies this for a living if you want a more accurate. But as far as fiction goes, I totally thought this. I thought it was gonna be what Split did, where there's one that none of the others know about or like to think about, and he's actually the worst one. But no, it turns out he's baby, Your Honor.
And I'll say that's honestly probably the whole 5-year-old thing is actually pretty accurate, because that is literally just, I'm speaking specifically for DID, OSTD, and the research I've done. It is literally a part of the brain that is split off as that kind of age.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is really cute that the others would treat him like an actual 5-year-old. That's sweet to me. I'm that makes me happy. Makes my soul happy a little bit.
and
Um, and
and
they
sorry.
did do that well. I'm glad that instead of like, I am happy they did the trope subversion, where at the
Mm-hmm.
last minute it's like, oh, actually, it's not what you think. That's just something I always think is kind of funny
Yep.
to do. It keeps you guessing. But
And
it's also good because, yeah, first of all, it's kind of raising the bar a little bit. And with the context you gave about just kind of how they didn't seem to know about him, that is possible. That is a thing. Obviously, like there are probably like there if anybody knows like sometimes people will keep lists, try to keep tabs on like who's in their head, like as you do. And there's definitely a couple people where it's like we have names written down. It's like I have no idea who that is. No clue. So it definitely happens, but it doesn't necessarily make them evil. It just makes them that much more mysterious because it's like, what? How did you get there?
uh,
um,
uh,
yeah. I had a thought and then I lost it.
and yeah, and then later, like as as Athena cross examines the clown lady more, we and then finally just rips apart any of her phony baloney excuses and alibis. We figure out that she not only did it, but but she's the one that set Uendo up, and kind of just, and like from what we can like piece together, just explicitly banked on like what is a, like a trope that worn out its welcome when it first got here. Essentially just like thinking that suspicion would just naturally fall on Uendo because again, as we've seen in just like other worse shows and games and such, just like why wouldn't it? And then just in a moment of panic, like Kisagawa just rearranged the cards that at first said Owen to like implicate Bucky, which yeah, and yeah, and
Yeah,
uh,
that's kind of how it.
yeah, I
Yeah, that's
mean,
how it played out.
yeah, I thought that was just I guess I get from like both a representation perspective and just like a storytelling convention that someone like, I mean, it's rare like in like I don't know, a game or a show that like inside like a character within a game or a show or anything or any sort of fiction like takes advantage of like I don't know, a real life bias. Like
Mm.
like she actually just banked on they you know like was more than happy to frame Bucky, but just I guess was also just banking on just you know information on DID is not as abundant as it probably should be, and yeah, I mean just
Yeah, no, it's hard to find good information, especially this is something I realized the other day. It's like, wow, like a lot of the big YouTube channels, at least a good couple of them, I wouldn't even recommend to people anymore. Not because of misinformation per se, but just being not great people, which is really unfortunate.
yeah,
So yeah, resources are kind of scarce sometimes for this.
and yeah, and like within like the larger framework of Spirit of Justice, like most of the cases in this game like contribute to like the main story of like cultural revolution, and again just since the this game and Dual Destinies and Apollo Justice are coming out, just go play it yourself. I'd recommend, because it is a friggin' wild ride and a very good one. But like this is completely standalone. Like it's entirely Athena's. Like it's not connected to like anything any like past or present like storylines or connected to any other characters. It's just, just more or less like another day in the office for, Athena. And like, it's stuck to me because, as I've said and as you've said and as, anyone who actually studies this like professionally said, like, this is hardly 100% accurate, but it's, all things considered, pretty dang good. And
Yeah.
like, I just thought it because, like, this actually, like, this case, one made me like want to research what Rakugo storytelling is, and from what I understand, it seems like my sort of jam. But it actually, made me want to, like, do this, get in touch with someone who knows a thing or two about this, and just learn a bit more. And like, I mean, I still probably should. Gonna do like a fair bit more research on this in the future, but yeah, I'm like, it's not every day I can say a sentence like, a Phoenix Wright game has, taught me about, an actual real life thing, and as the parts it got right made me want to, research the rest of it. And yeah, do you have any?
Yeah, no, I think this definitely gets a lot more right than most things do. And honestly, probably my second reaction, my first reaction is, oh, this is kind of silly. The second reaction was, thank God he's not the murderer.
Yeah.
Because as you see in like Split and everything, they're always the murderer or under suspicion or have murdered someone. This whole thing reminds me a lot of Toko Fukawa. Is it Fukawa? God, it's been so long, from Danganronpa, which unfortunate fandom, I'm aware. But her character in that, where she has a second alter named Sio, who is literally, I kid you not, like the super high school level, like serial killer, where it's just like, that's usually the kind of ridiculousness you get. This is actually a little more nuance. It's not just, oh, it's like two specific personalities, because I see that done a lot too, which does happen. But this is a little more common, where it's like a good handful of people, and then there's someone who might be a little more closed off from the others, and some others that are just much closer. That happens. That's something that happens all the time. The slightly different personalities and changes that can be shown are definitely exaggerated a little bit, so you can obviously be like, hey, something's going on. But other than that, like, that doesn't mean they're not there, because they sometimes are, just usually not to that extreme.
Yeah.
There's also something I keep losing this train of thought. I think it was just about the closed off thing. Like, it's not terribly uncommon for alters to have front triggers,
Mm-hmm.
which you could argue that alcohol is a front. I guess it's not really. I'm getting too into semantics here. But it is the whole, like, sometimes like certain circumstances have to be met for certain alters to front. That is absolutely 100% a thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
There are some times where it's just like, I don't know. Also, something that struck me
Mm-hmm.
is shoot, what's her name? The alter Kisagawa.
Yeah.
Something that struck me about her was that, because just from my standpoint, I'm like thinking, like, what kind of roles would these people have? And I think a lot of people would probably be like, oh, Owen's like a traumatized little kid, which, absolutely right. I'd probably call Owen like a trauma holder for sure, which is the technical term. But Kisagawa strikes me as the kind of alter that I feel like I see a decent amount just in ourselves and in others.
Mm-hmm.
I would personally like describe her as kind of like a protector trauma holder combo, which you'd have to do research into this. I should definitely find some links or something. I gotta find like actual research to give people, because this is just glazing the surface. She reminds me of a lot of protectors that like we have in our system and in other systems that we've met. Out of all of them, she seems the most real to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
just something about her shrewdness, but at the same time, her kind of like, I don't know. It's hard to explain. But
Uh,
I think if you're going for like a protector trope, I feel like they kind of nailed that on the head.
uh,
I don't know.
yeah, I'm with what little research I did while just looking stuff up because you know Uendo, Patches, Kisagawa, and Owen have just become my new favorites. And just because it's such a unique thing to see in media, and also they're just really funny. If you ever can, I'd recommend just if you look up like fan art of them, like Owen especially, because they just really just emphasize just how his hair just looks like a bowl cut when he's
It literally is a bowl cut.
and whenever they do fan art of him, they the artist just kind of just emphasizes the sort of slump like a little kid has when they're down in the dumps, and it's just it's a combination of adorable because Owen's adorable and also just like really funny because like every cat there's every Ace Attorney character is just they're never not a 10 emotionally regardless of what emotion they're feeling. Yeah, and uh yeah, I mean well, yeah, I'm not sure how likely this is because the Windows system is, a character in, what is an extremely standalone part of an extremely isolated a case very well isolated from any overarching story. But gosh and golly gee, I hope they make a return. Just in addition, because hey, maybe I don't know, maybe the Ace Attorney writers will, do a bit more research and get things slightly more right. And also just because, again, just really funny. Just like, Uendo just, just makes pun after pun after pun with just a straight
So
face.
many. So
And
many puns.
I'm pretty sure I've gone to school with and have at various points have acted like Patches. And I've met both as a teacher and when I was a youngin, met many met many people that give off mom energy like Kisagawa does, and
That's it. That's probably a word I was looking for.
yeah,
Protective. That's probably the word.
and Owen just reminds me of the job I've been doing for an incredibly long time now. Yeah, so I mean, who knows? The Apollo Justice, Dual Destinies, and Spirit of Justice are getting re-released on modern platforms. A new Professor Layton game is coming out, so maybe a new Phoenix Wright game is not entirely out of the question, and maybe we'll see these four different flavors of goofball make a return appearance. I mean, we've seen quite a few I remember back in Apollo Justice being very surprised when Emma Sky not only returned but has become a regular character in the franchise now.
I was thinking about that. There's so many characters that kind of came back that nobody that until it happened a couple times, nobody really expected them to come back.
So, if anyone at Capcom is for somehow just watching this, please bring these four back in a future Ace Attorney game, and just I want to see Owen just instantly bond with Trucy and just be amazed wow, a magician. And I want to see Uendo, Patches, and Kisagawa give Phoenix no end of crap because it's always funny when people give Phoenix crap. because
I
he.
didn't even think of the like Trucy and Owen dynamic. That'd be fun to see.
So yeah, I think we talked a decent amount about this very about these very unique characters, and yeah, I think we can begin to wrap this up. I would like to thank redbloodcherrie for joining me today and for like the first of what is hopefully at least more than one character analysis videos on uh
Yeah, I was very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
you're welcome. And so um just like I'm pretty, if anyone, if like the 10 of viewer that I have is watching this, I'm really underselling this because Uendo's system is just great to see, and they're all just like really funny. But just go buy Spirit of Justice because it's really nice, and it like every Ace Attorney games you're laughing, and then just some real stuff happens, and you get like hit in the face with the feels. So
That is a very accurate description. I just have to interject.
yeah. So and if you listen to us, talk about Uendo's system, and you're like, I want to know this, pick up Spirit of Justice. Well, you can't. Well, you can't at the moment. You'll have to wait a bit because Nintendo decided to, shut the eShop down, and
It's available on. I started playing it when you mentioned it because I was like, oh, I'm not familiar with the game. I haven't played it. It's available on. Definitely available on iOS. I believe it's still available on Android as well.
okay. Oh yeah, I totally forgot. Actually, look.
I had to look it up myself because I was like, did they release it on anything else? And they did.
So yeah, look it up on various smart devices, or wait for it to be released on modern consoles. And for those of you who don't, and for those of you who are just, I mean, I'm pretty sure you have to play through each case to unlock the next case in the game. But if you can somehow bypass that, the like Uendo was introduced in Turnabout Storyteller, and yeah, and yeah, Cherry, but was there anything, like, before I begin, the sign off, is there anything of yours you'd like to shamelessly plug and promote?
Oh, you read my mind. I actually looked up my handles because I was like, I wanted to be sure. You can find us sometimes, not as often, on Twitch at redbloodcherries, twitch.tv/redbloodcherries. Or more commonly, about every Tuesday, you can find us on Blood Cherries on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed me, just, I mean, usually I have a more definitive structure when I'm doing, like interviewing indie devs and such, but if you enjoyed my words and you'd like to hear some more words, you can like and subscribe on the Pumpkin Copter Cast. Yeah, and if you really want to support, you can go to patreon.com/the Pumpkin Copter Cast, where for as little as $1 a month, you can submit questions for me to use in future interviews. And if you really, really like listening to my words, I also do a podcast with my friend Tom called Gotta Recap 'Em All, where God is a horse, so nothing is off limits, in which he and I review it, solely watching and reviewing every single episode of the Pokemon anime and all the movies. And for those of you wondering, there's over 1,200 and over 24 movies, and we cover all of them. And yeah, including the one that gave kids seizures, and the one where Ash kept getting shot at with actual guns. So yeah, and you can find me on the Twitters at tgorman83 or Big Debbie. And yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast. My guest has been redbloodcherrie. The character has been Uendo Toneido. I mean, is that a pun? I mean, maybe. I mean, it means wind and tornado, so maybe. And the characters have been Uendo, Patches, Kisagao, and Owen, also known as Serious Man, Clown, Mom, and Just a Little Guy, respectively. And yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I say at the end of every show, have a gourd day, everyone.
Terrible.